So tonight we're going to talk about parenting with patience, and especially how to put the brakes on yelling. And that seems to be a big problem among parents, and it's something that probably doesn't hurt kids very much, but it's just a characteristic we don't like in ourselves. And just for fun's sake, what I did this week was my kids are pretty much older, and I asked them, do you remember when I used to yell at you quite a lot? And all my kids said, no, they don't remember. So I think it's Mother Nature's way of saying, helping them to forget, in that the hardest years there are to parent, we really slip up sometimes, we yell a little too much, but it's okay. They don't remember those parts of their childhood. So maybe that's a good thing. So, a few housekeeping things tonight. Let me introduce myself. My name is Judy. I've been teaching parenting around Canada for the last 18 years. I specialize in totally non-punitive parenting and education practices. I'm a certified Canadian family life educator, and I've written several books, Discipline Without Distress, and my new one is coming out of the publishers this weekend, called Parenting with Patience. And that's what we're going to look at tonight, is what's in that book. So those are the two books, and they should be available at bookstores, Amazon, different places. I also teach the Parent Effectiveness Training course, and also the Terrific Toddlers course that was developed by Alberta Health Services. Those are available in webinars and through in-person classes. So I know what the recommendations are. I know what we are supposed to do as parents, but I am also a realist, which means that I sometimes bring it home to my house, but I'm parenting 5 children. They range in age from 12 to 23. So this picture is a little old. 2 of them are now teenagers, and the oldest 3 are all in university in the city and away. So yeah, it's very interesting. I think parenting is one of the hardest jobs on earth, but it's also the most important. And it's the most important for you to take care of yourself. One time I put a mom's tip jar in the kitchen table, and then I put a wife's tip jar in the laundry room, and I got a few quarters and chocolates in the mom's tip jar, but not much in the wife's. That $50 bill in there is what I put in, and it didn't accumulate any more cash, so I've quit doing laundry in my house. A few housekeeping things. So everyone is muted, just because these webinars can handle up to a couple hundred people. So you can raise your hand in the question box. I'll take all questions at the end, and if you want, you can email me overnight or whenever if you want. If you're hearing echoes, you might want to use a headset, because that really does eliminate echoing. And this webinar is for education purposes. It's not to replace medical advice. Copyrighted, Professional Parenting Canada 2014. We ask that you not copy, share, sell, or lend it to anyone else. Where does this information come from? So the information in the book is, this webinar is from the book Parenting with Patience, which is basically a lot of advice drawn from different sources. Alberta Health Services, Canadian Pediatric Society, Health Canada, and of course Parent Effectiveness Training, since that's the course I teach. So in the table of contents, we talk a little bit about some basic facts about anger. And then we divide it into the 3 easy steps. And then we talk a bit about how to put it into practice. And within those steps, we're going to talk about child anger and also our anger, and how we can manage stress for both. And I'm an advocate of being a submarine parent. What is a submarine parent? It's getting underneath and looking at what a child's needs and feelings are. It helps to build relationships because children nowadays are living in a different world than when we were parented. When we were parented, parents could supervise and get a handle on where their children were. And if they didn't know, the neighbors and the world kept a communal eye on raising the village. Nowadays, they're very isolated, and especially children are so much online where they are not supervised and where they have to make good choices. So they make good choices because they remember a lot of what we teach them through us building a relationship with them. So 30 years ago, we used to expect kids to obey based on fear. They would get into trouble. Nowadays, we want to take fear out of that parenting relationship, and we want to put in mutual respect, open communication, so we can lend our knowledge and our experience to children to benefit them. So everything's connected in parent. We often ask parents in our classes, what are some qualities you want to see when your child you're parenting today is a teenager? And then we ask parents, what are some behaviors that are causing issues right now? And it's interesting what we get. The list of qualities is on the left-hand side, and no matter where in the world we start that with a class or a speaking engagement, we always get the same responses. So parents everywhere want that in their relationship, and that's a good thing because aiming for that kind of guides us on how to handle everything on the right-hand side of the day-to-day behaviors. Is what going to get us where we want to go. So instead of looking at short-run goals, such as stopping the behavior, making the child listen, relieving parent anger, we want to look at long-run goals, creating connection and belonging, teaching self-control, and social and emotional life skills to our children, not just in the parenting relationship, but also later in their future partner relationships, in their work relationships. So you want to build the relationship bond, and you also build the brain when you do that too. You want to have a strong relationship with your children. You want them to talk to you when they are teenagers and when they're adults. And if you focus on the relationship in parenting, maybe not so much on obedience and the outcome, you will get that open communication. So a positive approach is always better than a negative one. We don't have to make kids feel bad in order to get cooperation from them. Now let's look at anger and stress. Stress comes in 3 types. And I have a little picture of balls here just to kind of show you what it's like. Positive stress is motivating to us and builds resiliency. So an example of that is when we have to do a presentation for work. So we're anxious, we're worried about it. Every time we think about it, it builds stress, but it makes us put a lot of time into our presentation to make it good. So it's motivating, and once it's done, we can pat ourselves in the back and say, yes, we did it, woohoo! So that's the little cloth ball here. Very, very bouncy, bounce back to that. Tolerable stress is the golf ball, and it's negative stress. It's not positive. Nobody likes it, but it subsides and it's buffered by caring people. An example of that is probably our floods that happened a few years ago. It's not ongoing, but it's very, very stressful to people, but it was buffered by a lot of help and caring. So that bounces back too. The third kind of stress is toxic stress. And what that is prolonged, unrelenting, unpredictable stress and not buffered by caring people. And thank goodness we don't have that much ongoing, but it can happen at some point in people's lifetimes. And it's kind of like a rock. It can hit people, and it's the kind of stress we really want to avoid. So yelling at children does not hurt their brains. It's tolerable stress. It's not something we do ongoing or every day for 5 hours a day. If we yelled that much, maybe it would affect their brains long term, but right now it's not. It's not going to do any long-term damage, and kids are going to forget. So don't worry. If you've been yelling in the past, that's okay. If you slip up and do it occasionally, it's okay. Children are resilient to a lot of types of positive and tolerable stress. Okay, so this kind of just shows you a bit about toxic stress. Toxic stress can damage the pathways between children's brain neurons. But yelling doesn't quite fall into that category. So let's look at the 3 easy steps. Step 1, get yourself calm first. Doing that is time out. And we're not talking about time out for the kids. We're talking about time out for you. Step 2, get your child calm. And for them, it's not time out. For them, it's time in. And the 3rd step is solve the problem, and using tools and time together. Okay, let's look first at getting yourself calm. Time out is for you. Now, best way to handle our anger. Taking a time out is great modeling to the children. And what it does is it allows us to separate our anger from our discipline. And when you do that, you make many, many, many better choices. You can think, you get the logic part of your brain back, you can think about how to go ahead and proceed. So in my book, I talk about the chip issue. When my 4-year-old son Scott, he asked to eat some chips before dinner. And I had said to him, no, we're about to eat. So he took this bag of chips up to his room, and he opened them, and he spread all the chips all over the carpet, and he proceeded to stomp every last chip and grind it into the carpet. Now, this is an example of deliberate disobedience. And parents are usually pretty good when children misbehave because they don't know better or they make honest mistakes. But when children deliberately defy our direction, that creates a bit of anger in parents. So when I came up to see what the stomping was about, I was livid. I was so angry. And at that point, I didn't know what I was going to do. I'm not a spanker, but those are moments where you're very tempted. So what I did was I said to him, I'm so angry, I'm going downstairs and taking a time out. What great modeling to him. He saw how adults deal with a situation under stress. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about here of parenting styles, which I talk about in the book, and that parenting styles incorporate 2 axes: structure and expectations, and nurturing and warmth. And we're kind of missing the bottom here, but this should be high, low structure and expectations on the bottom. So the high structure is up here, the low structure is down there. So the authoritarian parenting style tends to have a lot of structure and expectations, but not very much nurturing and warmth. And on the other end, the permissive has, quite a lot of high nurturing, but not so much on the expectations and structure side, the rules, the routines. Then there's not many parents are uninvolved. But the best place to be is here in structure and nurturing. So the authoritative and the collaborative parenting style. There is a bit of a difference between those two. The authoritative is more, I will listen to you as a parent and get your input, but I will make the decisions. And collaborative is more the parent saying, your needs are as important as my needs. Let's aim for a win-win decision. So a slight difference, and but not very much. So if you can aim to be in this corner about 70% of the time, there are times you're going to be more authoritarian, and there's times you're going to be more permissive. But aim for this 70% of the time. So what is nurturing? Nurturing is comforting, kindness, giving attention, providing security, emotional validation, touch, listening, encouragement, protection, and not using punishment. What is structure? Structure is allowing age-appropriate decisions, natural consequences, giving guidance, coaching, teaching, helping to problem solve, setting family rules and limits together, having routines, rituals, celebrations, providing supervision and monitoring, even in the teen years, and reasonable age-appropriate expectations. So best place to be, high structure, high nurturing. Okay, so let's talk about our anger. We are modeling self-control. We have to show kids what we do with our anger. So when we feel anger, we get this big adrenaline rush, and we just have energy, and we have to dissipate that energy at some point. So these are all ways we can download our anger. We could go put a video on. We could see the humor in a situation. Some parents go and play video games to blow off steam. Some go and read a book. Some take a time out and go hide in the closet, being alone. Some will drink from a water bottle. Some will eat a healthy snack. Some will call a friend. Some will get a hug from another adult because they're going through a rough time. Some will talk to a friend or use self-talk. Things will get better. It's just a bad day. Cry is very, very good as an anger relief. Sometimes listening to music, putting on an iPod and just listening to some calming or even energetic music. Hiss is, one parent told me that's what she does. She hisses. Blowing into an anger tube, and we'll talk about that later in the children's section. Playing toys, sometimes that works for, more so for kids than parents. Parents like to yell into a pillow, try to yell at the wall, yell into the toilet, yell into a pillow. Try not to yell at a person. So if you're going to change one thing this week, try focusing your yelling at something else. A lot of parents like to go for a walk, go for a bike, jump on the treadmill, shake off their feelings physically, stomp, run, jump, maybe do a silent scream, knead bread or weed garden, or, oops, sorry, we'll go back. I'm trying to close this here. Write poetry, write a letter, make something, or write in a journal. It depends on what type of person you are, what works for you. So when you're angry and you're about to yell, try to do one of these things. Okay, time out for you allows you the space to calm down. Now, don't worry that you have to address things in the moment, because you don't. Children, even young children, you don't have to issue discipline right away. They'll remember 10 minutes later when you remind them of something, or maybe later that night at bedtime. timeout for children is often for our benefits. When we put kids in timeout, and it goes by all these names, quiet time, alone time, reflection time, but what we need is their timeout, and it's a way of enforcing us to have some time and space. So instead of fighting them to put them in timeout or to punish them with timeout, try to use your timeout. Putting them in timeout has a few issues. It's not the end-all be-all discipline technique that we like it to be, but it does have some problems with it. And probably the biggest ones are what I've put here in yellow, is that you can get into power struggles. It doesn't teach kids conflict resolution. It gives negative attention, and it models power and not peace. And those are some of them, but there are more. And timeout is a good life skill, but I'm a little worried we're raising an entire generation that will not be taking their timeouts because they've only experienced it as a punishment as a child. So timeout is for you, time in is for them. Model a timeout, and they will learn it's a great adult way of handling stress. Okay, so part 2 is get your child calm. This is time in. When we say to kids calm down, they do not have the skills to calm down. We need to get in there and help them. Just as when they come to us with a fraction or a math problem, we don't send them to their room with a math book and say, come on out when you know those fractions. We go and help them. And that's the same with their emotional upheavals. We need to help them get control and to the point where they can start doing it on their own. So back to the chip episode. When Scott, who shared a room with his brother, when his brother saw all the chips on the floor, they started fighting. So this is where I was calm. I came back to the issue, and I had to separate the fighting siblings. So we did a time in. So I grabbed each by the hand, didn't talk, because when people are upset, they don't hear you. We went downstairs and sat on the couch, and I started reading from a book. And amidst the crying and very soon they stopped crying and started listening to the story. So my whole purpose there was to get everybody calmed down so we can move into problem solving. And I built a little bit of literacy skills just by reading out loud. That was a good time to start reading. So I'm going to skip through some of these just because I don't think we're going to have time. These are for my stand-up presentation. So you, as a parent, the submarine parent, you have to get at what's the need underneath the behavior. And both child's needs were, one didn't want chips all over his room's carpet, and the other one was he was angry and needed to blow off steam. So don't worry, children's anger is not your anger. It's their anger. And we want them to acknowledge, accept their anger, do something with it, and solve the problem. Because anger is motivating us to make change, and that's a good thing. Anger is perfectly normal. It's a good thing. So children misbehave oftentimes because they have limited brain development or they have a need of feeling that's not being met. So aggression is very normal for children under 5. And let's look at their hitting, their throwing, and biting. Oftentimes this results from anger. So why are children aggressive? Oftentimes they don't have the verbal ability to be to talk. It comes out in body language. Their anger, their emotions are expressed in what they can do. And it's often when we say no, we're the gatekeepers to what they want, and they can't express their feelings in words. And that's normal. So what you can do is redirect them to something that helps them calm down from the anger. Now, little children are very physical, and oftentimes they do need something physical to express their anger with. You could give them a beanbag chair to hit or hug or punch or kick, but anything that doesn't hurt anybody or anything is acceptable. You can teach them to hammer their hands. You can teach them how to breathe. You can give them this anger tube. So this is a paper towel roll that they can decorate, and you teach them to blow out. Blow in, blow out through the anger tube, and it helps them to get that breathing, that calming breathing happening. Teach them to stomp. That's actually my favorite tool. I stomp a lot, and my kids stomp, other than yelling. You could teach them to signal for a hug, or to drum. Get them a little anger drum, and this is where they express their feelings. Give them a stuffy. Now, you don't want to give them a stuffy to throw for young children under 5, 6. For older children, you might have a designated spot where they can throw a stuffy if they're mad. But be careful, not for younger children. And same with the anger pillow and bat. My son was about 7 when we made this, and it wasn't a plastic bat, it was a Nerf bat, and he could hit this when he felt angry. A lot of parents worry that physical expression of anger escalates the physical expression, and that's not true. Young children, like I said, are very physical, and they do need to express it until they can use their words. Eventually, as adults, they're going to use words to express their anger, or jump in the treadmill, or all those things I talked about, yell into a toilet. Those are ways that adults handle anger, and they're okay too. You could get them to draw you a picture of how they feel. Have to supervise that one. Or they can redirect their stuffy to throwing it to a target. And if they're biting, you want to give them something to bite. You don't want to let your children hit you or bite you. So if you have to hold their hands to stop them from that, that's okay. You're restraining them. Now, children do have temper tantrums. Very, very normal. 95% of children have them. They start, you know they're starting, and at some point you could try and prevent it just by giving them food or quiet. But at some point, that's not going to work. So they escalate, they peak, wait it out, don't do any teaching, don't punish, and eventually they do calm down. And when they're down and calm, then you give them the words for how they're feeling. You say, you were really angry back there because your brother took your toy. Give them the words, the anger words, so they can relate the anger word to their feelings. And temper tantrums come in 2 types. The spillover tantrum, where they've just had too much stimulation, too much lights, people, activities, that kind of stuff, not enough sleep or food. Or power struggles, that's when you're in a store and they want the chocolate bar at the checkout and you've said no. The best thing you can do is stay with your no and endure the tantrum. It'll be a lot easier if you don't give in. Okay, and temperament figures into that too. Some children are born easygoing, about 40%. Some children are born high need, which is about 15%. And they're both on different ends of the continuum. And temperament is composed of 8 traits. So easy children are low persistence, low sensitivity, very adaptable, not very intense, very regular, not very active, positive first reaction to change, and pretty stable, even-keeled moods. Spirited children are very persistent, very sensitive, not very adaptable, very intense. You see their temper tantrums last an hour and a half. not very regular, so not very good at sleeping, eating regularly. Very, very active, very bad negative first reaction to change, and sometimes quite moody. So these traits do get better, and I talk about that in my book about how they change. And there are positives and negatives to both easygoing children and spirited children. But it helps to know more spirited children tend to get angry more because they don't adapt very well. So, and their anger lasts longer and has more intensity, more energy into it. So just be aware, if your child is doing an hour and a half temper tantrums, that's why. They will grow out of it. It's just you really, really learn to pick your battles and say to yourself, do I really want to endure an hour-long tantrum today or this hour? And think about your answer carefully. It's okay to have a few no's, but generally if you have a spirited child, you're going to give them a longer leash. And this kind of shows you a little bit about spirited children, toddlers, and preschoolers. A little bit of characteristics. I'm not going to read all these, but it kind of shows you what you're dealing with. The big ones here is their frustration tolerance is very low. They get frustrated easy, and then they're very violent, intense temper tantrums and anger. Okay, and what they need is a lot of patience. So if you need to fill yourself with lots of self-care in order to be patient with a spirited child, that's what you need, very much so. Okay, I'm not going to talk too much about tantrum. So the third step is step 3, solve the problem, and that's time together. Now, back to our chip problem. We actually had 3 problems here. The original problem was, what could he do when he was hungry before dinner? The next problem was the mess on the carpet, and the other problem was, what's a better way to handle his anger next time? So if I gave him a quick spank or I gave him a time out, that wouldn't have taught him how to solve all 3 of those problems. And what it does is just make them madder. So let's skip the timeout for him and let's go directly to problem solving now that he's calm and his brother's calm. So what we did was, first of all, he cleaned up the mess. And he's 4. He doesn't do a very good job, but it's getting him through the motions and showing him how to vacuum up the chips and clean the carpet. So it was a really good life skill. He learned how to clean carpets. The second thing was, what could he do instead next time he was mad at something I ruled on? So he decided that he was going to kick his beanbag chair. If he didn't like something I said and he was mad, he was going to do that, and I was going to remind him and direct him to the beanbag chair. And the third problem was what to eat before dinner when he's hungry and I want him to eat nutritious foods. So we decided, we brainstormed some ideas to meet his needs and my needs, which is just what problem solving is, and we came up with an idea of how to have a drawer in the fridge with healthy snacks he could help himself to and wouldn't even have to ask. So we solved 3 problems. And getting back to those long-term life skills, that's what good discipline is about. It's about teaching social, emotional, life skills for belonging and connection. And it's about stopping the behavior. But if you get at the need, you're going to get at the behavior. So discipline is about teaching self-control. And we have to model self-control. So basically there's 3 ways to solve any problem. And that's what we want to teach our kids. Any issue in life, they have three choices. They can surrender or let it go, they can leave, or they can problem solve and negotiate. And if number 3 doesn't work, then they're back to number 1 or number 2. They can surrender or let it go. And that's a good thing to teach children, is you got to know when to hold them and when to fold them. So let's talk about surrender. A lot of things in parenting we have to surrender because it's just a stage. It's all about developmental stages. And children go through stages, and it's only for a certain amount of time. I love this little poster where it shows you really you only have a toddler for 2 years. Yes, you can't reason with a toddler. They're loud, they're active, they throw tantrums, but it's only for 2 years. And then they grow into a more reasonable preschooler that gets into power struggles. But it's all a stage. And surrendering it to just a stage, they will go out of things even if you don't address it. It's all about brain development. So children are born with 100 billion brain cells, and most of them are not connected to each other before birth. And they start connecting based on a baby's experiences. So the axons reach out to the dendrites and send neurotransmitters out based on the baby's sensory experiences. And those neurotransmitters jump over gaps between neurons and forms pathways. And that's a good thing. Like I showed you before, the more pathways, the better. So children under age 5 listen about 40% of the time. Part of that is their self-control. They may understand the command you gave them, but they don't have the self-control to actually obey or do it. And when 60% of children under age 5 don't listen or comply, and that's pretty normal, it puts things in perspective for us in that, okay, maybe I don't have to nip this in the bud at 2. For example, toddler hitting. Okay, they have many years to learn not to hit, and a lot of it's just a stage. But a lot of parents project and think, okay, age 2, I have to nip this in the bud, I have to stop this now, or they're going to be hitting at 18. And that's not true. They're going to be different developmental stage at 18, and their brain's going to be much more mature. So these are the stages of development. Little babies, their brains are just concerned about input and output. They can't think manipulatively. They're not figuring out how to get you back in their bedroom and pick them up from their cribs. They can't think like higher order thinking skills like that. All they feel is cold, hunger, scared, and they cry. It's sensory input and output. Little toddlers, their brain drives them to explore. They're not being bad, they're just doing their job. Older toddlers, their brain, the middle of the brain, the amygdala, is especially sensitive now, and that's the feeling part of their brain. So they're having this explosion of feelings and anger, and they want to do all these things, and they have limits put on them, and then they explode in frustration. Very normal, but it's a stage. Preschoolers, starting to think and question and whine. And they are starting to learn how people have power and how they can use power. And the 4 things you have no control over is their eating, sleeping, toileting, and learning. They have the power. And that's good, but this is a stage where you can start to teach, but without the expectation they're going to remember or get it. So before this stage, you're just doing damage control. You're keeping kids safe, and you're keeping your stuff safe. At this stage, the preschooler stage, you're starting to answer questions and get them thinking, but they're not logical yet. So this is why consequences don't work yet. They're not, consequences are them understanding operations. If I do this, then this happens. That's concrete operations, and that does not come until the school age years, which is why they don't start school, mandatory school, until age 6. Now you get to the school age years. They're thinking logically, concretely, but it's still tangible, things in their world they can see and touch. So these are the best years to teach children. They make a lot of mistakes, they argue and question, they develop their vocabulary, their conversation skills, they're learning about rules. This is where you're going to do most of your discipline and teaching. Around here, about 60% of kids listen if you give them a directive. And then they get to abstract thinking. Their brain has developed. Still, that feeling part is now more sensitive, just like the toddler years, but they're separating from adults and learning to deal with a lot of their own consequences, their own decision making, and that kind of thing. And then 19 to 25, their brain is still actually forming. The prefrontal lobes are still the reason, the decision making, the planning. All those are still solidifying until about age 25. So everything is a stage in terms of brain development, and children do pass through stages. The second thing you can do is leave. Take a break. If what you're trying to do isn't working, maybe that's time that you just need to take a break, get out of there, take another time out. And the third part is negotiate. So work it out, problem solve, talk it out, negotiate. Now, there's very definite differences between discipline and punishment. Children do not need to be punished in order to grow up to be great kids. They don't have to. Punishment, there are no studies out there that show that punishment builds a relationship, but there are a lot of studies that show the effects of punishment. Discipline, on the other hand, means to teach, and it teaches kids, it has very positive outcomes. And possibly the hardest part about good discipline is staying with your no. If you've said no, you have to stick with it, and in spite of pushback and tantrums and attitude, staying with your no shows your integrity. And you always get to control what you do. You can't control those kids, and that's okay. Parents are not judging you. We know that. If we're a parent, we know how hard it is to try and control another little human being. But you can control how you react and what you do. Okay, so you don't want to use punishments because as kids grow older, they become much more ineffective, as you can see by this chart. And the sooner you stop using punishments, the sooner you can build your relationship. There's lots of problems with spanking. I'm not going to go into them right now, but they do have, the risk of them having long-term effects is higher the more you spank. So there are many benefits of not using punishments on children. One of them is less stress, and kids have more responsibility. As I told you in the chip episode, Scott learned 3 things that he wouldn't have learned if I just gave him a quick spanking. So what do you do instead? Okay, so you want to problem solve and not punish. And a lot of the tips are in my book, Discipline Without Distress. I did not include them in Parenting with Patience just because it's already out there. But for babies, you don't really need to discipline, but babies are that stage of parent-child attachment. So learning to trust each other by meeting babies' needs and learning a bit about child development. As they get older, Then you want to do substitution, prevention, distraction, redirection. Great tools to keep babies safe. You can't tell a baby something and expect them to obey. Neither with toddlers. So here, toddlers, you have to spring into action as a parent. You can't issue a command and expect them to listen. You have to move them, you have to child-proof, and you have to redirect them. Best discipline tools ever. And for preschoolers, now, again, mostly action, but reinforce it with talking and discussions. So if you say no, stay with your no. If you get pushback, move into problem solving. Look at ways you and your preschooler can solve the problem that meets both needs. And remember, children do gain better self-control by age 6. That's when they start school. School age. If you have school agers, now this is where you can talk, and then if they don't comply, back it up with action. Okay? So if you say, can you get your room clean by the end of today, and you see it's not done, that's when you can go and stand by them and say, okay, how about that room? So best discipline tools here are modeling, acknowledging their feelings, and using your I statement. What's an I statement? An I statement is I feel, and then you insert your feeling word. Say it's anger. I feel angry when I ask you to clean up your room and it's not done. So you want to talk about how you feel with an I, not a you, not you make me angry, but I feel angry. And then talk about the situation in the least blameful language you can use. And children, I'm going to rush through this a bit. Teenagers, okay, so big negotiators. By the time our children hit teenagers, and I'll tell you, I stopped all punishments when my oldest child was 10. So I never did spank, but I was a timeouter and a consequence person. And then I realized those things did impact our relationship, and they stopped talking to me. So I decided to let go of those too. And all we did was problem solve through the teen years. That's all we did. I didn't take things away. I didn't withdraw privileges. I didn't ground them. I certainly didn't spank them. We only did problem solving. And the teen years were a breeze, absolutely a breeze, because they learned how to negotiate, and with me, with their dad, with each other, with other people. So sometimes best discipline tools is with boys, going for a walk and problem solving really helps. And with girls, sometimes going out for a coffee or hot chocolate and talking things out and coming up with a plan that meets both needs really helps too. Best discipline tools. Lots of conversations. Lots. So problem solving is basically finding out what the child's needs are, declaring what your needs are with an I message, coming up with some ideas together, and then evaluating those ideas and then putting a plan into action and checking back to see if it works. So with Scotty and the chip idea, we had to go and check back and see, okay, is the new rule where he could go help himself to nutritious food in the fridge, is that working for him? Is it working for me? So problem solving is involving your child in the solutions, coming up with ideas. It's not you coming up with the ideas, it's you and your child working together on the same team against the problem. Very good relationship builder. And if you're stuck, sometimes the best discipline tool when you're mad, they're mad, is a hug. Get a hug, and you're starting from a place of calmness, of peace, of compassion, and then start talking. So, to recap, Discipline, 3 and under. Lots of ways here. Supervision, child-proofing, routines, alternatives to no distraction, acknowledging feelings, I statements, modeling, giving lots of attention, ignoring negative behavior like whining, and if all else fails, you can always move them. 4 and over, you're moving. As they're gaining self-control, you're moving more into talking, teaching, discussion. So, and good old choices. Offering choices really takes the power out of power struggles. And sometimes just accepting it's a stage. They'll grow out of it without a whole lot of intervention on your part. Okay, so to recap, get yourself calm. Time outs for you. Step 2, get your child calm. Time in is for them. Step 3, solve the problem. Spend time together and work it out. Because all anger is alerting you to a problem. And that's a good thing. It needs change. So that recaps tonight. A relationship involves 2 people. Remember, it's you and your child. And we want to thank Calgary's Child for bringing this. And I would like to, I'm going to thank you for coming tonight, and I'm going to just open up the floor for questions. I had to go through a lot of slides just because we're running out of time, but if you want more in depth, please feel free. You can purchase the book. It's at Amazon and most bookstores. Thanks for coming.